Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey, what's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So, today I have the pleasure of welcoming back Than Thein from Tidal Gardens. What's going on there, Than?
Not much, just hanging in. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. Awesome to have you back on. So, just a real quick about Than. He is the founder and owner of Tidal Gardens, a coral reef aquaculture business that's located in Copley, Ohio. He is also an author and contributor to several reef keeping industry publications. Is that still true, Than? Or not so much anymore?
Less now than ever, but occasionally every now and again.
Yeah. So besides being a passionate entrepreneur, Than is a licensed attorney, has a master's in business administration and a Juris Doctor from the University of Akron, and a Bachelor of Science in biology from the University of Michigan. But before we start chatting with Than, I want to thank the sponsors for this show, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate them supporting the live stream, and I also appreciate all you folks out there that have been tuning in and are tuning in right now. Good number of folks I see are already in the stream. As always, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button so more people can find us, that would be awesome. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And please feel free to drop some comments and questions in the chat. I see there's a whole bunch already in there. We'll sift through this stuff and try to incorporate as much as possible in terms of the questions and the comments. Sean Clark, Than is my spirit animal. That one caught my eye.
I try.
So what's happening, folks? All right, great. So, Than, what's going on? What's new in Tidal Gardens these days?
Not a whole ton that's new. It's a bunch of little things, I would say. So, I've started to build this building about 4 years ago, and I've been pretty much the entire time doing project management, and we're finally to a point where I don't actually have to do any more projects because the thing is like more or less up and running. And we are just finishing up the existing projects that are in the queue, but it's a really hard habit to break after 4 years to not stack more projects into the queue to follow it up. So I've been struggling with just staying pat and just getting done with whatever we need to get done with. All the little things, just polish it up and then leave it and just relax. Because all I do now is I just think of more projects to do.
Yeah, that's kind of a thing we all, I guess all reef keepers kind of fall into in terms of projects popping up. But you have a beautiful facility there. So were all these projects kind of like on the original project list, or did like many of them just pop up after?
No. So a lot of the projects. So now I guess we're getting into some really extravagant stuff that has no business case whatsoever behind it. Like it's wasteful to some degree, but it is in service of trying to build a building and a place of work that I actually want to work in.
Yeah.
So it's not completely like worthless, but it's extravagant. The other stuff that we're starting to do is reworking stuff that's already working and trying to make that aspect better for some reason. So, for example, I'm looking to redo certain aspects of our heating and cooling systems for our aquariums. Right now, it technically works fine. It's robust, it does work, but there's ways that I think that we could, squeeze out a lot more efficiency, both space and energy. And there are ways that we could greatly increase capacity. So for example, we have a geothermal cooling system where we are basically, we're collecting rainwater and we're running heat exchangers in the rainwater that we've collected to, in the summertime, bring down the temperature of the tanks. It works kinda. As we're adding more tanks, obviously we're losing, the capacity for cooling. So a huge project potentially that we've been talking with the plumber for now maybe 2.5, 3 years is to increase the cooling capacity of the geothermal system many times over. So we would have something like 20 tons of cooling or something like that. Basically with all of our same existing infrastructure with just a bigger section of geothermal pipe, stuff like that. So long story short there, I think that it might be like 6 kilometers of tubing underground or something like that.
So the end game would be to be able to save a lot of money, I'm assuming, in terms of electricity costs, just having very efficient heating and cooling systems.
Yeah, I think that the first thing that we have to look at beyond just like electrical efficiency is just like capacity. So when it's 100 degrees outside, I want to be able to pull the tank temperatures down into like the low 70s if I wanted to.
Whoa.
That sort of thing. It's like, oh, you have basically like a 30-degree delta on thousands of gallons of salt water. Don't care. We have the capacity. We're going to bring it all the way down if we wanted to. Like that sort of thing. Just being able to like just brute force past these types of issues that pop up.
That's pretty impressive because to be able to cool. I mean, so how often are you cooling your tanks in the summertime? I mean, does the I'm assuming that you've got quite the cooling system in the building itself, and that's probably doing the majority of the cooling in terms of the tanks.
Yeah. So there's 2 buildings, right? So there's the greenhouse, which is really the culprit as far as needing the most in the way of cooling. And there, it's a combination of a whole bunch of things. So it's a bunch of different types of exhaust fans, things of that sort. There's the geothermal cooling system. There's whirlybird rooftop vents that allow a lot of like the heat that accumulates at the top of the building to get out. And this past summer, I actually spray painted I rolled epoxy on the entire greenhouse. And that cut down so much on just like the thermal load of that building that helped out tremendously. So the next big step would be the expansion of the geothermal capacity underground. And at that point, I'm pretty confident that we could do a whole lot of cooling. And then after that, we can look into more efficient heat exchangers in and of themselves. So like going to titanium rather than we're currently using PEX, which is doesn't have like the coefficient that we're really looking for. But you know, titanium is super expensive, and you know, it's just another thing.
So, yeah. This is a corny interview question, but where do you see you guys in like 5 years in terms of Tidal Gardens? Is it more expansion in the plan, or is the greenhouse going to get a complete overhaul and replaced by something similar to the new facility?
So there's no plans to do any huge change with the greenhouse as a building. Mainly because we can't empty it in order to do construction, I guess. Like that's the biggest hurdle. Whenever we have like a huge sale, for example, like a big customer might come and they might like fill an entire truck, like a distributor level, not just like, oh, a local fish store or somebody doing tank maintenance. It has to be like a wholesale distributor level customer comes in, fills up a truck. And most of it will come out of the greenhouse. And when they leave, there's no evidence that they were even there. And so for us to be able to like shut down that many systems, move all that coral somewhere, don't know where, and then do a construction project over many months, like I don't even know. And I just tell my guys, like, sell everything in this building. And they're like, we try. It keeps growing. It's still here. So it's like that.
Here's an interesting question from Andy Boma. What do you do if a pipe breaks underground?
What do you do if a pipe breaks underground? So if we're talking like a geothermal loop, that would be really difficult to break. Like really difficult, because if you've ever like handled like 3/4 inch PEX, I don't even know what it would take. But if you do have a leak in that geothermal line, then yeah, you're probably gonna have to dig up the entire thing and redo it.
And that would not be a good thing in the wintertime, I would assume.
Meaning like a break in the winter?
Yeah.
Just shut it off and then deal with it, you know, when you can actually excavate.
Yeah.
But no, that would be really bad. But we've had that type of PEX tubing, and in fact, much higher quality PEX has been installed since on all of our new projects. But even like the bad PEX, quote unquote, we've had underground there for 25 years, and it's been like fine, and we still use it.
So, talking about projects, what projects do you have that you just keep putting off and putting off and putting off? The projects that you just dread doing.
The projects that I dread doing.
Because I have some.
Well, we'll get to yours in a sec, because I'm actually curious to hear, because I'm very gung-ho about projects. It's usually not me that's the one that doesn't want to do it. So obviously the geothermal one, having been put on the back burner by the plumber for 3 years now, that's probably one that's been, you know, dreaded.
Yeah.
But as far as like stuff that I want to get done, oh yeah, here's one. So we are in the process, a very slow process, of redoing our closed loop systems. Okay? Our closed loops work just fine, but some of the pumps are not optimized for running in a closed loop configuration. So they need a lot more hand holding and a lot more maintenance, and sometimes they need to get swapped out. And we don't like to spend that much time babysitting closed loop pumps, especially when we have, you know, 20 some odd closed loops.
Yeah.
So what we're doing slowly is replacing pumps with Abyss A400s. And we need a dozen of them.
Wow.
And I don't want to pay for a dozen A400s right now. So that's something that I'm actually dreading. Not because I don't want it done, because I just don't want to pay for, I just don't want to pay for double-digit Abyzzes. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, even at the wholesale level, it's like, that looks like a retail number. when you're looking at a biz.
That sounds like a crazy number there, Than. Yeah, my project that well, so I've done a lot of plumbing with PVC pipe in my two systems, and so we were talking about this before the live stream. I've kind of like got one of my systems is sort of like a Frankenstein setup because I initially set it up as a display tank, 187 gallon display tank, and a 75 gallon frag tank that's plumbed into it, with a 74 gallon Dreambox, Royal Exclusiv Dreambox. But since I installed all the piping and the tanks, I've added another 50 gallon frag tank. I've added a cryptic sump. What else have I added on there? I've done a whole bunch of stuff to alter the plumbing to fit in all those other tanks and other pieces of equipment. And so there's a lot of elbows and unions and valves in there. But I made the mistake of using some cheaper valves when I did this stuff. And over time, one of the main valves has broken, and it's a very complicated process in terms of cutting out that section of the plumbing with the valve in it, because it impacts at least one of the frag tanks, and it impacts two of the drains going into the dream box. It's freaking complicated, man. And I just I'm kind of like letting it ride to see if it to see how it works and whether or not I really need to do this thing. But I know eventually I'm going to have to do that. And I got another broken valve in my my water changing system, but that's in a 50 gallon drum that has salt water in it. So I guess my tip to folks out there that are watching is don't cheap out on plumbing, right? I think especially valves, because if you buy like those cheap like white with the red handle or the blue handle valves, they will eventually fail if you use them a lot. That's what I've found, at least.
There's a couple things. I think that pretty much most valves after some time will go bad. So be prepared to occasionally service them. Sometimes I like to put unions on each side of a valve.
Yeah.
That or buy a true union ball valve, for example.
Yes.
That has it all built in. But there's like no such thing as a true union gate valve that I know of. So anyway, be able to take a valve out and service it. Stuff grows on valves, things like that. And people also don't know this, but you actually have to use the valve every now and again. So if you just happen to have like valves that are open all the time for 4 years and you go to close it for the first time, you might be in for a surprise. The other thing that I would probably suggest, and this might even apply to your project more than anything, is that I think sometimes when a project gets ultra complex, I think that we get into this mindset where we get really clever, where one length of plumbing does 4 things.
Yeah.
And when something goes wrong at that stage, the problems then spider out. So now what I'm trying to do is like simplify my plumbing. Sure, this can be done more efficiently to do X, Y, and Z different tasks. But no, I want one set of plumbing to do task 1, one set of plumbing to do task 2, one set of plumbing to do task 3. So when there's an issue in the number 2 line, it is just isolated to the number 2 line, even though it essentially triples the cost of it, because you're duplicating what could probably have been combined. But when it comes time to do maintenance on that, that's when it really pays off.
Yeah. Sean Clark, Spears Plumbing or bust. I agree with that. Spears is makes some great stuff, some high quality stuff. So, I mean, some of the like the you mentioned the union ball valves. I mean, that's not cheap stuff. When you get into the bigger.
Spears is expensive. Like a true union ball valve from Spears, 1.5 inches is probably like $40-50.
Yeah.
Spears, like a T, like a Schedule 80 1.5 T right now is $10 or something. No, it might be even more. It might be like $15. So it's stunning how expensive PVC is.
Yeah, and the new facility, you're pretty much all Schedule 80 with that. At least that's what you could see in terms of what's out in the
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, most of it's Schedule 80. So the reason why I went with Schedule 80, and because this is stuff that always comes up, right? somebody will always say, you don't need it because you're not running any pressure rated
Right.
applications, right? So there's no benefit going from Schedule 40 to Schedule 80. Technically true. But the reason why I go to Schedule 80 isn't for pressure rating, because I don't think that pressure is a purchase decision or a purchase criteria for any of the plumbing we do in the hobby. I mainly do it because it needs to survive when a ladder gets dropped on it. Like I have a staff. We do actual work all the time around these tanks. We have contractors here all the time. They routinely will trip over a pipe that they should have seen, that they installed, that sort of thing, you know? And like, because for years, this was like an open construction project. Part of the reason why we didn't have any customers allowed to even see the facility for like years, 3 years. Nobody was allowed over, partly because it was unsafe to be here. Yeah, when you have contractors tripping over their own stuff, it's probably going to be bad for a retail customer, right? So, but the thickness of the pipe has to be very abuse resistant. Also, 3 years from now, when I want to send a snake down there and to really clean up all the buildup of critters, because people really underestimate how much stuff can grow in pipes and block things up. You have to snake it, and I want to make sure that like the pipe is robust enough to handle all that.
Are you worried about snaking a pipe and getting some stuff into the system that perhaps you might not want to get into the system in terms of some bacteria that might have been collecting on those inside of the pipes? You know, some stuff that could be, I don't know, potentially lead to issues. I've never, in all my years in terms of keeping reef tanks, I've never snaked any of my return lines, drain lines, or anything. And
either,
so I've never heard of that before. That's intriguing to me.
Well, it's I think for a home system that's sort of manageable.
Yeah,
it's probably not a big deal, right? But I literally have some aquariums that are 50 feet away from their sump. There's no other thing that I can do other than clean that.
Yeah.
Both the feed line and the return, right? And the big drains. So they have to be serviceable. They all have, what are those things called? Like basically ports where you can put a snake down in there. And now they make snakes that are like, you can like hook it up to a pressure washer.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so you just like send like a 4,000 PSI pressure washer, snake through that. It has like all these different like angles and stuff like that. So yeah, you could just blow the hell out of anything that's in there.
That would be a project I would not be looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that my pipes are all clear.
So, all right. So I noticed we got Andrew Sandler in the chat there. What's up there, Andrew? And that's a good segue, because I was going to. You've been doing a lot of traveling the last several months. I know on your YouTube channel you've documented your travels. You went to Andrew Sandler's place. You went to you visited Jake, at the Reef Builders studio. There's a whole bunch of people that you visited, and let's start with Andrew's place, and I know you did a whole video on it, and those guys did a video on it in terms of, but maybe people didn't see that. What kind of like stood out to you when you walked in and saw that 17,000 gallon tank in a living room?
Yeah, the first thing that hits you, at least what immediately struck me, was how the media that you see online doesn't fully capture how big the tank is. And you hear people say it, right? So like you should expect it, but what throws you off is just like how big the fish are. The fish are absolutely enormous. They're just super-sized fish. So when you see video of the tank, you kind of have like a mental image of like how big a yellow tang is.
Yeah.
Like 3-4 inches, right? But the ones in Andrew's tank are not 3-4 inches. Nothing in the tank is 3-4 inches. So so the tangs are all like 12 inches. So everything is like orders of magnitude bigger than what you're normally used to seeing. So when you're looking at this tank and you're seeing these gigantic fish and the tank is still looking gigantic, that's when it all kind of hits you.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem real in terms of that kind of display tank in a home, and just the fact that he's got 2 floors below that house the equipment to run that tank, and I guess other tanks within the house is just boggles the mind.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of engineering that goes into it, and it's good to see what like really high-end industrial engineering applied to a tank like that, or a system of tanks like that. Because there's a lot of stuff that we were doing in our systems and in our construction that mirrored what they did in theirs. And where we differed, that's where I found the most interesting. Like, for example, when we were talking earlier about heat exchange, like we did a very different kind of heat exchanger, and I actually like the way that they did it better. The only problem on my end is that I would have to do it 8 different times.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't love that,
Yeah.
that aspect. But getting like that food for thought, because a lot of this stuff, you can't just pick up a book and, oh, here's the manual on how to do these like massive mega projects. Like, that's just not a thing. And even in public aquarium land, that's not really a thing. A lot of that stuff is super custom, and a lot of public aquariums out there are like really primitive compared to what Andrew's put together. Like really primitive. Or even compared to like your and my regular home style aquarium. It's light years more advanced than sometimes what you see in like the professional public aquarium market. So yeah, to see how people have gone through the engineering and problem solving for some really big challenges is always very interesting to me.
Did that potentially plant the seed in your head to maybe go even bigger with a tank at some point down the road?
Funny, no.
You didn't want anything to do with that, huh?
No, it was okay. So no, never. Because I was even looking at my 600 gallon. I've got 2 600-gallon show tanks, and all I thought was like, these 2 tanks are a pain in the butt. Like, I don't know if I would ever want a 500-gallon tank or bigger ever again. Like, so to want to put together like a really big show tank wouldn't be up my alley at all. It's kind of funny. I was just thinking about just what we spend all of our time and attention on at Tidal Gardens. And there's like this hierarchy of stuff, right? And towards the bottom of this hierarchy are doing anything with the show tanks. They're the most neglected things ever. And possibly right around there, if not below that, is making YouTube videos, which is outrageously dumb on my part, because I need to make more YouTube videos, but it always gets pushed down the priority list. But down there with making YouTube videos is definitely doing anything at all with the show tanks.
Really?
So our show tanks are just big and kind of sad looking.
No.
Well, no, they're not sad looking. They're not. They're just big, and it's just whatever.
So hold on, why 600 gallons, 500 gallons? Why is that a pain in the ass? What about that size tank do you find more difficult than, let's say, a 200-gallon reef tank?
So if the biggest thing is usually on these bigger tanks is the depth of them, like the top to bottom depth.
Yeah.
Basically, anything above 24 inches is going to be more and more problematic, like every single inch, right? So when you're talking like 36 inches, good luck.
Yeah,
right?
it's tough.
Good luck, especially for a big tank that's super wide. If it's a 4-foot wide tank that's 36 inches deep, you're going into that tank to do anything. Like you're climbing in. It's a huge pain in the butt. Mine aren't even nearly that much of a pain in the butt. But for example, like most people's aquariums might be in the ballpark of like 120, 200 gallons for a big home aquarium, right? The amount of time that you would take to spend to do any work in that, it's a lot, but it's manageable. But in a 600-gallon tank, you do that same amount of work, and it's like, man, nothing got done. It's like this tank just keeps on going. And the problem that I was trying to solve, let's say you're trying to solve like bubble algae by hand, which I don't know what you're doing that for in a 600, but let's say you are, right? It's almost like painting a bridge. By the time you're done painting the bridge, you have to start over at the beginning of the bridge and start painting it again. It's so much actual effort.
Yeah, so you talked about like a 36-inch tall tank, and I've always had, until my last tank, 24-inch tall tanks, and I've loved them. Been great. But my latest tank is a 20-inch tall tank, and I just really like that height a lot. It's 6 foot long by 3 foot wide and 20 inches tall, and it's manageable in terms of getting to certain, pretty much every spot in that tank. If you got a little step ladder, you could easily get to the middle and to the bottom. So, but yeah,
there's a big difference between 20 and 24.
Oh, but it's so cool. I really I love it, and I think I'm not sure I would ever do 24 again. I'm not, but wide. I think wide is like the most important thing though with a reef tank. The wider you go, I think the aquascaping options just kind of like open up. So, but yeah,
I would agree that wide is very good for just the reason that you stated. I think the only thing that I would add to that is like that depth does unfortunately matter for how fish behave. Like I think that when you go shallower than 20, they get like extra neurotic swimming. And I think that the deeper tanks for that purpose are really nice because you get much calmer, less neurotic fish. I've noticed. But I do like that 20-inch tank. Like our newest set of 5 aquariums, they're all 20-inch, and it's really nice.
And those are the purpose of those tanks are for housing frags, growing out. Hey, kitty.
Yeah, get out of here. She's been a menace the past couple days. I'm so sleep deprived. Yeah, so that particular system is kind of unique here because we are setting it up specifically for selling because we have multiple buildings. I want to kind of concentrate our website inventory in one spot so that shipping and packing kind of happens more in a more centralized location, and to have it be right there, right where we are dropping off our boxes at the front of our building, like all of that stuff just flows more nicely. So that system is like the only one that's really not dedicated to farming anything. It is simply a representation of what we have for sale.
The other thing I think with a large 500 to 600 gallon tank is that, like you mentioned, bubble algae or something. If you had some sort of, you had algae in one of those tanks, right? A whole bunch of hair algae, and so the more traditional methods in terms of nutrient reduction, in terms of manual removal of algae in a tank that size, is a lot of man hours, right? It takes a lot of time. Bryopsis, you got bryopsis, popping up. One way to remove bryopsis is manual removal or put some putty on top of it or what have you. And for a tank that size, you get a decent outbreak of whatever, then it's like multiplied 20 times.
Yes, and even when you are relying on herbivores to deal with a lot of your issues, and herbivores that actually would work. So, for example, fox faces do great with bubble algae. So we have 2 fox faces in that tank, and they can't keep up with some of the algae because you're just asking 2, 4 or 5 inch fish to handle 600 gallons of aquascape. And it's like, yeah, sure, they eat it all the time. It helps, but it's not like it's ever just going to go away. So part of it is also just having like the scale up of cleanup crew and beneficial like fish and everything like that would get the job done is a lot more than what people think.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to put in emerald crabs, think about 24 for starters. And then unfortunately, like we can't catch them all back when we want to then do like a treatment like interceptor or something. It becomes a whole ordeal. Like there's certain problems that there's really just no great solutions for at scale.
Right.
Which is ironically my talk at a Reef Stock is going to be problem solving these sorts of things at scale.
Oh, yeah.
With either big tanks or a collection of a ton of smaller tanks.
Well, yeah, I was going to kind of dive a little deeper into that. Maybe we should hold off on that topic. I don't want
Oh, you're not stealing any thunder. It's not prepared. My talk is not done.
So do you think that in that vein that with a larger tank that you're more prone to take shortcuts, let's say using chemicals to solve an algae issue or things of that nature?
I've never been a proponent of that. Never, ever, right? This past year, I've been a lot more receptive to trying things. Okay, so in that particular system, we did run fluconazole to knock down a lot of like different algae. Honestly, I don't even actually care about bubble algae, but there's like this leafy green algae that I kind of want to eliminate, and so the fluconazole really did help with that. But fluconazole, which is it's kind of like an anti-algae whole treatment. You run it for like a month or so, maybe a little bit longer. It kills the heck out of algae. But it also kind of messes with certain large polyp stony corals a little bit. But 95% of all the other corals seem to be unaffected and fine, right? But certain things get kind of upset, and then here and there, right? So I don't think that there's any like whole tank treatments that are altogether like perfect for anything, but they really can help. So like I said, we did fluconazole, we ran interceptor. Just because we were noticing like certain things on like our acros, but they weren't like red bugs, and there weren't like the really, really, really bad black bugs or white bugs even. It was only under ultra super macro that you're seeing something there, and it's like, well, it's one of those things where like if you look, the deeper you look, the more you see, right? So it's like if you look at your eyebrows, eventually you're gonna start seeing dust mites, you know. That's just how it is. And so like at what point does it matter or not matter? And I'm like, well, who cares? Let's just bug bomb the whole tank anyway. Because it turns out that, like a certain just regular amphipods, like part of like cleanup crews and stuff like that, sometimes they bother corals.
Right.
Or something that just happens to make their little mucousy tunnel that collects detritus right next to a coral. Technically not a pest, but is bothering a coral. Like a lot of stuff bothers coral, right? So I'm thinking anything that's an arthropod dies in these systems. And so we had to like, catch all the crabs, catch all the shrimp that we could, best we could. And then we blasted with interceptor. And we noticed like certain corals that we didn't even think had any problems. They were fine. The day after we did interceptor, they're 4 times the size.
Wow.
Like bubble anemones were 4 times the size. And it's like, we thought that they were fine to begin with. It turns out something was bugging anemones apparently, because they're all ginormous now. Like stuff like that. So now, and this is like such a hard separation between what like a professional coral farm does versus what like a hobbyist would do. Because this sort of extreme stuff isn't necessary for hobbyists. Like, create like a very natural ecosystem thing that is kind of like a nice biological microcosm, right? But there's some serious benefits at the commercial scale for a more laboratory-like approach, which might not be as robust biologically, but you have the control of at any time I can drop the interceptor nuke and kill anything that doesn't have that has that receptor in it, that it targets. So so to answer your question, I'm more receptive to whole tank treatments now, even though I don't think that there's any like real perfect ones out there.
So the fluconazole, besides Bryopsis, what did the fluconazole take out algae-wise?
So actually, I didn't even have Bryopsis.
Oh.
Like Bryopsis is one of these. Okay, knock on wood.
Everybody's got Bryopsis. What are you talking about, man?
Yeah, but okay. So okay. I should go off on a tangent, but stick to the plan, right? Bryopsis is one of those things that we simply don't struggle with.
Really?
Not that we shouldn't struggle with it. It's just, I would say that we have it. You might see one tiny patch once every 3 months in literally tens of thousands of gallons of reef aquariums here.
Wow.
We have other algae that we don't like.
Mm.
Don't get me wrong. Specifically, Bryopsis isn't one of them. We typically are trying to get rid of a lot of the more macroalgae-ish stuff. So there's certain types of like red turf algae that we don't like.
Yeah.
There's certain types of like leafy green algae. I think it's
Ova. Yes, I've had that before.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, no, it's not good. Tangs like it. Certain tangs like it.
Yeah, to a certain degree, but that tank, for example, like our big SPS show tank, the 600 gallon, it had like a dozen tangs and 2 fox faces, and they ate that stuff, and it still outgrew their appetite.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Scale, it has its own issues.
It's interesting, and I think so. I had Jason Fox on the show a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned fluconazole, and he I guess he said he used has used the Reflux. That's I guess a brand that is basically fluconazole, but it's like it's something that's sold in the aquarium trade as a specific treatment for Bryopsis, I guess. Anyway, he said that he only used like 1/10 of the recommended dosage, and it absolutely cleared up the Bryopsis, which I thought was interesting. But do you worry at all in terms of the collateral damage that something like that would do to the bacterial population? Is that any concern of yours? I guess you said you did see some LPS or some SPS that weren't terribly thrilled with the treatment?
Yeah, because you're always going to run into that almost with no matter what you do, something is not going to love that. It's going to be like a very small minority, but it's always going to be something peculiar, like specifically Favia or specifically Micromusa or Goniopora or something. Like a lot of the full tank treatment stuff affects large polyp stonies, I would say more than SPS, more than acros. Yeah. Again, it's I think I consider them extreme treatments. Like I think that if you could not do them and still get the same results, go for it. Like if you're running like 30-gallon tanks and stuff like that, just get in there with a toothbrush. You'll be fine, right? Right. 600 gallons. You're not
so you're right. I mean, you're basically you gotta kind of like, when you got that kind of scale, you have to kind of at certain times do some things that you might not necessarily want to do if you had a 100 to 200 gallon display tank. Yeah, I mean, I'm dealing with some cyano. Well, actually, I think it's green cyano on one of my display tanks, and it's mostly on the sand bed, but it's also on the rocks. I had rebooted this tank, a few months ago, so it definitely was a big deal in terms of upsetting the system. But anyway, so the way I've been trying to tackle it is to do a lot of manual removal, siphoning the sand bed, cleaning the filter socks daily, trying to blow detritus into the water column so the mechanical filtration can't get to it. Really just kind of rolling up the sleeves and using that good old-fashioned elbow grease to try to tackle the problem that way versus kind of like nuking the tank with perhaps like ChemiClean or something else.
Yeah, that's a really challenging problem because a lot of it's really not it's not super obvious a good path to go. Like a lot of the stuff that you would think should work doesn't always work that well. Yeah. Things like because me, I would always just revert to doing tons of water changes and try to do activated carbon more. But I think some people advocate that it's low nutrient that makes it more powerful and more explosive is when you get to the really low nitrate and phosphate levels. And there's certain things that you would think that might help, like running UV. Maybe doesn't really do a whole lot. Do you run ozone?
No, and I know you started running ozone. And there was a couple of comments in the about your how that project is going for you in terms of using.
Oh, I like it. I like it a lot. Okay. So here's the nice thing about ozone, which was like a kind of a pleasant surprise. So the smallest ozone unit that Ozotech sells is I think the 200 model, right? It is so powerful that it can run literally anybody's tank. Like it's so powerful. I mean, short of like Andrew, right? But I mean, we run that thing on a 2,500 gallon system, and it does okay.
Wow.
Like it's absurd. And so my friend Brandy, she just put that same unit on her tank, and she can't run it more than 10 minutes without topping out her ORP.
Oh, wow.
So she just runs it 10 minutes a day, and her ORP is consistently at like 400 now.
So besides incredible water clarity, what is the advantage of running ozone on a tank?
So the big obvious benefits would be the clarity, the lack of odor. So okay, so ozone has a very particular smell. It's like this very dry, dusky, staticky smell. Okay, that's probably not great for you. You probably don't want to be smelling a lot of that, right? But we actually have like an air sensor that we can detect if we have like dangerous levels of ozone at any given spot. But if you're worried about like skimmate smell or just like that, just gross tank smell, you don't have any of that anymore. Like when you walk into like my warehouse, like the new building, we're running 3 ozone systems in there. You don't get like weird smells. I mean, unless somebody just like used the kitchen very recently or something. But like tank smell, no.
So even when you're cleaning the skimmer out, you don't smell that skimmate.
Only because it just went down the drain, and that's kicking it up.
Yeah.
But like in day-to-day operation of a protein skimmer sitting there, you would not smell the protein skimmer. Like there's no way.
Wow.
I can't imagine.
All right, I want to try to keep get some questions in here from the
some audience participation.
This is going back to the algae we were talking about before. Brian Cook, what fish and inverts do you find most effective for green hair algae? I have a 180 gallon with green hair algae that I can't get to a manageable level. Have a Tamini, whitetail tank, foxface, snails, and hermits.
Yeah, so when it comes to dealing with hair algae, I wouldn't rely as much on herbivores because I think that most herbivores find it really unappetizing. So what you really want to do is probably get in there and just with like a toothbrush and siphon and polish it up as much as you can to get coralline algae growing.
And you have a device that you have.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of just like a little DIY hack job. But there is like those like airless cleaners that's a kind of like a fan operated, looks like a little gun that you use for like your keyboard, right? But it's an airless. It's like it doesn't have like a pressurized canister. It's like actually a little electric device. Well, those things come with all types of different little heads, right? So one of them is like a brush head, and you can just stick that onto a hose and then do siphoning with it. The attachment, not the electrical blower part, right? Just like the brush siphon attachment. And you can just sit there and just make like circles and really polish up the rock. Because what you want to do is you want to get coralline algae growing, because hair algae will have a much more difficult time growing on coralline.
Right.
Because the coralline itself wants to prevent other algae from growing on top of it.
Great bearded reef. We're switching gears. ReefBum is Than thinking of doing the big open house, outside open house cookouts like pre-pandemic in the future?
Unlikely, but not totally impossible. Not entirely impossible.
I saw another question where somebody was asking whether you're going to let locals in, and so I think people are knocking at the door there, Than. They want to get in.
For sure. Guys, we are accepting like shopping visits again. The times are limited though. A lot of it is going to land on like Friday or the weekend, but it is possible to be let in the door now.
So the door is slightly ajar at this point.
Yeah, so you'll have to email us at support@tidalgardens.com and see if we can accommodate.
Be the fountain, not a drain. Parties. That's the quadruple exclamation point, or is that the 5 exclamation points? I can't.
That's Brandy. That she's the one with the ozone system that she leaves on for 10 minutes a day.
Ah, gotcha. I don't know. I'm scared. The ozone scares the crap out of me.
It scared the crap out of me for the longest time, and it was just one of those things where I just happened to be commenting on like Devin's live stream when he had like the Ozotech people on, and since they've like eased my mind about a lot of issues that I had, they've come over to my facility numerous times now. Actually, I believe that Andrew Sandler just replaced his old ozone system with their like commercial ozone system. So like they've been very supportive, and yeah, pretty much all of my big concerns were not that big of a deal.
You know, I have a so I have calcium reactors, so I got a couple of you know, canisters of carbon dioxide. Also, I ship with oxygen, so I have a high pressure, you know, canister of oxygen. I'm a little scared just having those things around.
Yeah, you trying to like
knock them over.
Rockets.
Yeah, exactly. Or commenter about what's this? Jason Larawan. I'll knock down a whole cow for the barbecue. Great Bear to Reef ReefBum. What about a ReefBum and Great Bear to Reef road trip? I believe that's to see Than. NSB Reefs. I'll bring the beer bong. Whoa, okay.
Not that kind of party, guys. Not that kind of party.
Not that kind of party. Yeah, we want to. This is a family you know, show here. We want to.
Actually, technically though, the last time we did the barbecue thing like years and years ago, there was alcohol. So it's not that it wasn't that type of party either. I guess.
Yeah, folks, keep dropping those questions into the chat, or comments, I should say. Also, so Than, let's get back to the travels. So we talked about visiting Jake at Reef Builders.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of stood out to you in that visit when you visited Jake there?
So Jake leading up to that trip was like telling me like how much he's like trying to like clean the tanks because he said that I would notice. You know, that was like super flattering. But yeah, when we got there, yeah, the tanks are really nice because, you know, he is so into coral. Like, guys, you know, yes, he did it as a profession, right? But you know, when the camera's not rolling, when he's not writing a blog or whatever, the guy was just singularly focused on coral. That's all he wanted to talk about. He didn't want to talk about industry drama. He didn't want to talk about anything going on in the world. He didn't want to talk about business, nothing. All he wanted to talk about was aquariums and corals. Because he just wanted to pick my brain about like X, Y, and Z, you know, just like what did I think about this? What did I think about this? And his tanks were like wonderfully pristine. So I used maybe a couple of clips from his from my visit there, but I thought that it would be in poor taste to use those. So I'm gonna at some point I'm just gonna like talk to his wife Windsor. I'm gonna double check. I was like, do you mind if I use this in the future? But because I never actually did a video about my experience there,
Right.
because of like you know his tragic passing. So I never really revisited my thoughts of the aquariums. You know, it was more about a retrospective of my experiences with Jake.
Right.
So yeah, maybe that's something that we can dive into more later on my channel when I actually, you know, when I'm more comfortable about actually talking about that stuff.
Yeah. Did you when you visited the studio, or you know, I guess you mentioned the heat and air exchange system at Andrew's place, or the geothermal at Andrew's place, but when you visited Jake, was there anything that you had seen there in terms of his setups that kind of piqued your interest and like, that's an interesting idea. Maybe that's something I might try in the future.
Yeah, there's a couple things. So first of all, there's a couple things that I saw there that I would never in a million years do. So he doesn't use RO for saltwater. He uses RO for his freshwater stuff. He just uses regular tap for his saltwater stuff. And I think his thinking there was like, who cares? It's all going to get mixed into salt anyway. And I'm like, yeah, because your water up here in Denver is clean. Like my water from my well is 900 TDS. And when you mix salt water into it, the next day, all of the calcium precipitates out. All of it. So it's all white on every flat surface. You're like, no, like there's people out there, Jake, that need to run RO and do this. It's not just an esoteric thing that that they're getting scammed for. A lot of people really need this stuff. So that was like just a little funny aside. But he doesn't use RO. He didn't use RO for his saltwater tanks. There was a brand of pump. Going back to my Abyss thing, right?
Yeah.
So when I told him that, yeah, it's like I want to replace all of my closed loops with Abyss, and I need like all these pumps. He was horrified because it's actually horrific.
Yeah.
But
sure.
He said, "Have you ever tried Deltec?" And I was like, I'm familiar with the brand, right? It's been around forever. It's German. I was just at Magna and I had met like the CEO. He had come over from Germany, and it's like, you know what? That's really funny. I've never ever considered Deltec ever. It's just not a huge big name in the reef aquarium world in the States as it is in Europe. And he showed me like their Deltec 8, like their DC pumps, the E flows. And he said, yeah, it's basically like a baby Abyss, and it's like $1,000 cheaper. And I'm like, well, damn. It's
okay.
like, I'll try a few of those, right? And I have one dumb quibble with the pump, okay? It is purely, uniquely a fan problem. It is not a Deltec problem in any way, shape, or form, I don't think, okay? Those pumps are so outlandishly high performing. And so like that was one idea that I got from him was like, try these Deltec pumps. And I'm like, okay. It turns out they're super impressive. And so we're using them in the greenhouse, but we're going to be using a Biz still in the new building.
What about methods, in terms of how he he had some very distinct methods that he kind of liked to adhere to. He didn't like bare bottom tanks.
Yeah, well, okay. So I asked him about that, and I got like a super short answer that was just like straight up condescending sort of thing. It's just like, I was like, why do you like bare bottom? He's like, because I like to grow coral, like that sort of thing, right? But I mean, I am so like not polar when it comes to substrate choices. I could not care less if we had substrate or not. Everybody at my place is way more passionate about one versus the other. For example, like most of the guys would prefer a bare bottom just for like cleaning purposes.
Yeah.
Okay, which is hilarious because none of them clean it. I clean it. Right? I'm usually the one doing like the scraping of the bottom. It's almost exclusively me. Recently, we got one other person that he does that stuff now. So it's like the guys that are the most vocal about substrate issues don't deal with the substrate. Becca has put a substrate in her little like YouTube show tank, right? She touches that sand once a year tops. I never see it getting disturbed. So it's not like like a huge constraint as far as maintenance goes. But yeah, Jake, for example, was like all about no substrate, all bare bottom. But yeah, he was. The other thing that did pique my interest is how much he was on the I need to dose nitrate and phosphate train. Like he said, once I started doing that, that was the secret ingredient, like the nitrate and phosphate. I added this, my corals blew up, and I'm like, I have high nitrate and phosphate. I'm not going to do this. So, but in his systems, they were very, very low for both of those. And once he started to add that back in, he got a lot of success.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never had dosed nitrates and phosphates in my whole time keeping reef tanks up until the last 5 or 6 years. And one system right now I'm doing it, and one system I'm not doing. And it's the it's a system that I'm getting that kind of green cyano in the sand bed that I'm not doing it anymore because I was dosing a lot. And, I think that the sand and probably the rock perhaps absorbed some of that phosphate, and now it's leaching out.
Mm. So a phosphate is something that perplexes me to a large degree because we've got one guy here and he is just like insane about phosphate control. And I'm definitely on the other end of the spectrum. But he's just like, if we don't keep our phosphate at 0.05, our stuff isn't going to color up. I'm like, debatable. And on the other end, there was times where we had 2 parts per million of phosphate and things were fine. Not even like no algae problems, no coral coloration problems, no problems whatsoever. The phosphates were 2 parts per million, not 0.2, 2. So,
Yikes!
I can't get worked up about phosphate after the experiences that I've had. Like,
What the thing that frustrates me about phosphate is actually getting an accurate reading of what the phosphate level is in the tank. And I get frustrated by the hobby grade test kits, and so I've been doing more ICP testing to try to see if there's any thing that I could kind of draw a parallel to what potentially the test kits are saying versus the ICP and come up with some sort of factor. But I think that's something that frustrates me in terms of trying to get an accurate reading of phosphate. Not an accurate, just kind of know that you're not at 0.
yeah. So here's a couple things that I think on the subject of testing, period. So I think hobby grade test kits, a little suspicious, right? But I don't know if ICP is like the end all be all either, because I think that there's a certain proponent or there's a certain perspective out there that this technology was not made to work in saltwater at all, never. And like the results that you're getting are unreliable at best, and so much of it is like an ICP machine is not just like a microwave oven that you just like put in 1 minute and you get like that perfect burrito. It's highly finicky. So if there's any mishandling of a sample, if there's any contamination of a sample, you're going to get junk results. And so like a lot of like serious business labs that are doing work for like the pharma industry, like a highly trained like machine operator, they're very valuable skills. Like pharma will pay a lot for that skill set. So I don't know how great ICP is in this industry yet. It is really nice to get that printout and see everything. But really what I would want to see is something like a test that we could perform here locally. That's like a huge perk. But I just want reference solutions for everything. So I just want to make sure that like when we are doing our like weekly tests or whatever, sure, right? Let's just see what the numbers are and what they do. But if something is so out of line that we would actually want to make a like an impactful decision around it, right? So we need to control this thing because it's going sky high. We need to lower this. We need to raise this, whatever that decision is. At that point, I want to make sure that the numbers that we're seeing are really those numbers. So now I want reference solutions, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And if the test kits are nailing reference solution numbers, then I can like better trust the outlier number that I'm trying to fix at that point.
Yeah, you have to wonder in terms of ICP testing. You mentioned it would be great to have a local ICP by you, but you have to wonder in terms of the how the sample would degrade over time in transit. What happens in that regard. So if you've got, obviously when you draw a sample of water from a tank, there's going to be some bacteria in that sample, right? Does a biofilm build up on the sample tube on the inside, and does that bacteria grow in transit, and does that impact some of the elements that the ICP is measuring?
Yeah, and I've even heard that like certain metals are so reactive that just the process of delivering the liquid sample into the machine, all of that particular metal could be bound up just in the tubing that's used. And so you might actually be positive for a certain, this is, by the way, super, like, just super conversational third-party stuff. I don't know, okay? But apparently handling issues is a thing, and you might have heavy metals in your water and not have it show up on ICP. Like, the machine can pick it up, but because of handling issues, it never makes it into the machine. And so when you have like some weird SPS deaths and stuff like that, time to check if there's like exposed magnets and stuff, because it could be heavy metals that's not showing up on any test kit.
Good point. So I wanted to incorporate a question from a viewer that was submitted before the live stream here, Than. It's actually Andy Boma again who wanted to ask this question. He actually had a couple of questions for you. One, we'll get back to this in terms of the RTN, STN with SPS, but going back to the phosphate, you mentioned phosphate in terms of having very high phosphate. And so Andy, recall that you did have some pretty high phosphate, like in the 1 to 2 part per million range, and used to say that you didn't think the phosphates mattered that much. But I guess he said that was the time around Rich Ross started saying the same thing, and Worldwide Corals also had a large display tank with high phosphates. So now you're right. You're running your systems at about 0.05, and you're recommending keeping them. I guess your person loves that range. So
yeah, that's more him than me.
So the question is, what changed at the coral farm there that convinced you to run the phosphates at the lower levels?
I think it's actually my apathy towards it. If somebody is going to be like that, that much of an advocate for it, and I kind of don't care, sure. Let's do that. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. I think the only thing where I kind of like put my foot down a little bit more is like, look, we need to chill out on the GFO, because sometimes I'll notice certain LPS, sometimes Ghanies, sometimes Micromusa, they look extra upset, and I am kind of blaming the GFO. Right, which might be completely off base, but sometimes like that pursuit of like the low phosphate when we're running like these aggressive things to like scrub that out, when I think it's kind of unnecessary, like that's the sort of stuff that where I would give some pushback on that. But the trying to lower it overall, sure, I don't really care. Oh, you want to rinse the food out a little bit better? Sure, I don't care. Want to cut down a little bit on the nori? Sure, whatever. It's fine. It's fine. There's a huge range where you can be highly successful, and yeah, if you want to make the effort to do that, go crazy.
How did you guys get the phosphate? I mean, that's a very high level of phosphate. How did you get it down to the 0.05 type of range? What
it was mainly water changes in GFO over the course of like years, slowly, right, just chipping away at it.
Yep. So the other part of Andy's question, or actually it's a whole separate topic, but I mentioned RTN, STN, and we've talked about this on the live stream before. I think we might have talked about it with you, Than, the last time I had you on about a year ago, and I've also had some recent conversation with some other guests about it. But coral disease, right? So if you get RTN and STN, there's a lot of unknowns, right, with that stuff. Brown jelly disease. How do you guys typically handle that sort of thing? If you see something like an event like that going on, and it's not just 1 or 2 corals, but it seems to be like a series of, one coral is slowly, bleaching out, or one overnight bleaches out. How do you guys handle that sort of thing in terms of treatment?
So that's a super like perplexing problem. Yeah. That happens, and I was just talking to one of my friends, and he has like a 1,000-gallon aquarium that's absolutely gorgeous. It is filled to the rim with like amazing acros, and he's like saying that, yeah, had some random die-offs, like trouble in paradise, right? Just why are you dead? And that happens all the time with acro keepers. At the coral farm, we always just like my like mental hierarchy as like, all right, what are the first things that might be a problem? Is there a pest issue, right? Because if there's something actively eating the coral, it's probably not going to survive,
Right.
right? So immediately think, okay, pest first, because but before like, oh, let's check the water chemistry and everything, like make sure nothing is actively eating the coral. Sometimes that thing is a fish you put in there that you just trusted, like a flame angel. And it's like, but I've never seen it attack anything. Yeah, trust me, it's eating your acros. Like that sort of thing, right? Secondary to that, because I'm going to go ahead and assume that serious business SPS keepers, their calcium alkalinity, magnesium, nitrate, phosphate is not going to be the outlying thing. And chances are, even if it was a value that's too high or too low, that's still probably not killing your acros. But pests certainly will. Fish certainly will. The next step below that, I would look at perhaps heavy metals, especially when you see a normally indestructible coral die. Like when you see a stylophora colony die overnight.
That's not a good sign.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
Right. That's super
bad.
weird. Yeah. And we had that happen. It's like, okay, time to check for copper in the system. That sort of level of this isn't right. And sure enough, we found probably like 8 different magnets that were exposed to water.
Wow.
That do something bad, right? Or like a pump that needed maintenance to the point that it was like leaching rust into the water. That's probably not great. Things like that. Last thing below that, so I guess we're in the 4th little criteria worth like looking at, is like bacterial issues, and bacteria issues especially that that happen after you've like done something with detritus, like kicked up a lot of detritus and it resettles. Because
that's why I'm nervous about you snaking your pipes there.
Yeah, we would basically run that all through like filter socks and stuff.
Gotcha.
Just micron all of that up, like yeah, aggressively micron all that away. It would hopefully theoretically not make it back. Oh, whatever. Thoughts and prayers, right? But one time we had done some maintenance and I saw some detritus collect on like some larger acros. And when you have detritus collect in the middle of an acro, that's not great, you know? So I actually took a turkey baster and I was blowing off the detritus from the acro colonies. Next day, 4 randomly scattered, you know, colonies dead.
Oof.
And I'm wondering, it's like, well, is it just like this bacteria transfer from detritus settling somewhere else? And that makes me want to like go and take extreme action. You know, like I want to take all those acros out, dip everything in like Cipro and iodine and Chemiclean, which I believe is erythromycin.
Yeah.
And just give it like at least a short bath to try to like knock down. I think it's what Acrobacter is the bacteria
that's a pathogen. Yeah.
Yeah, just to see if it's like sitting like on any of the colonies, zap that. Then while all of those are dipping in a separate container, polish that tank clean. You know, like drain it, get all the fish out, scrape it down, hydrogen peroxide, the whole thing, reintroduce everything, turn the water back on. Like that's the sort of maintenance that I would be looking to do if I thought it was a bacteria issue.
Yeah, so I had Chris Meckley on, and we talked a lot about the use of oxalinic acid, and as a treatment against bacterial infections, and so I've gotten a lot of people to reach out to me, ask me about the oxalinic acid treatment, but I always, you know, the first things I say to people about the treatment is that what you said, Than, which is you know, rule out all the things that you would, you know, think might potentially be the cause of it initially, which are pests. Is it heavy metals or, you know, rusty magnets? I always suggest doing ICP tests and that sort of thing. But yeah, I did hit one of my systems with oxalinic acid. I had some random RTN, STN events going on for a few months, and they started to kind of like happen more frequently. And then I did an in-tank treatment, and this is a thriving, you know, SPS dominant tank. And you know, knock on wood, it's been 3-4 months, and those episodes have stopped. So And I did a pre-post aquabiomics test. I did a, the pre-test showed the presence, and I'm assuming Andy is still watching the live stream here. I can't remember the name of the bacteria that I had that was very high before I treated the tank with oxalic acid, but that bacteria dropped a lot, after the treatment. It's still in the system, but obviously it's not at the levels where it's harmful.
So what's the treatment methodology for that? Because I'm really unfamiliar.
It's very similar to ChemiClean. So you're basically using a certain amount of the oxalic acid. Oxalic acid is, my understanding, it's very similar to Cipro. And you're using a certain amount of, grams per gallons in your system. And so it was 3 different treatments that, I had done to the tank, and basically turn the skimmer off. You take activated carbon offline. If you're using UV, you take that offline as well. You do a treatment, you let it go for 24 hours, and then you put all that stuff back online. Well, yeah, you do the treatment for 24 hours, put the UV, activated carbon, the skimmer back online for 24 hours. Hit it a second time, repeat, and do it a third time. And yeah,
it has antimicrobial properties.
Yeah. But it's actually something that people use to treat disease in koi. So it's a koi antibiotic medication. Interesting, but yeah. So, have you ever thought about, or do you guys do anything for corals that come into the facility there in terms of kind of doing bacterial dips to prevent any of these bad bacteria from getting into your systems? Is that something that you've done in the past or thought about doing?
Not bacteria specifically. We do mainly pest control dips on coral intake. But the other thing is we don't do a lot of coral intake. Last year I was an admittedly bad customer for a lot of my suppliers. Like we were so into our capital improvement projects and stuff like that almost all of the budget went towards that, and we had the tiniest coral acquisition figure at the end of the year. It's absurdly small for a place of our size. Absurdly small. I know places that would spend more than that in a week, like that level of tiny. And we just farmed everything. And so we don't do massive intake. We don't import. Yeah, so usually anything we get has already been through an importer. I believe they dip. They didn't used to, but I think they do now. And the dipping only does so much, but we try to stay on top of that.
Andy Bowman. Thank you. All right, so he chimed in with the information I was looking for. So Andy says, after Keith treated Arcobacter and Shemia, am I pronouncing that correctly, levels were reduced by a factor of 10. Because I shared my results with Andy. Yeah, so that was a very interesting result of that. And what else did I?
Would you keep doing it? Would just keep doing it forever?
That's something I think that you wouldn't want to do that all the time. I think if you do it every several months or 6 months or whatever, if you do it once a month, I think that's a bad thing, because then you could build up.
Just get super bugs.
They would be resistant to the antibiotics at some point in time down the road. So yes. That's the whole thing. I guess you got to be worried about that. Other comments and questions I see here. Random fact, Chris: oxalic acid is used in beekeeping to kill mites. You learn something new every day.
I'm always so slow on the uptake of trying something new. I need to have a whole bunch of people advocate for it first, and then I'll give it a try. So for the longest time, I've been a very early adopter of a lot of things, but I was having a conversation with somebody about about this, and he's like, yeah, there's like no benefit at the commercial level to be the early adopter of
Yeah.
anything. There's no first mover advantage. There's just a bunch of mistakes that get made. Let's let other people, just to run their faces into a brick wall for years before it gets like figured out, that sort of thing.
So you're not an experimenter at this point?
I'm really not experimental at all. Like I am a problem solver though. Like when I'm seeing issues, but I do it more on the engineering side, not on the chemistry side. Like ideally, if there's an engineering solution to some of this, I want to do that. So for example, uh, I want to be able to do hard resets on these systems and make that process easy. So like 300 gallon, like my tanks are roughly between 300 to 500 gallons
Yeah.
each. I want to be able to hard reset one of those a day,
Whoa.
no problem.
Wow. Okay.
And be easy, like not just be like, oh my gosh, this is like this monumental task. It's like, no, it's not a big deal. One person could do it.
So speaking of experiments and changing methods and whatnot, I'm assuming over time you have changed some of the things you do in terms of tending to a reef tank. Is there anything that you've adopted that you said, nah, that's not for me, after doing it for a while? And if so,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah. So again, giving engineering stuff a try. Uh, I think I've used every single type of automatic tester. I think I've run the entire gamut. Like I've used them all, right? Uh, I stopped using all of them because automation on that scale, when we have so many different systems, it became a thing where all of these different auto testers were so needy for attention and maintenance, and there's always some reason why they couldn't perform a test, or it was out of reagent, or it needs to have some tube looked at. Something was always up, right? Or it's just reading a ridiculous number. It's like, well, that needs to be calibrated. When you have like 10 of these units, let's say, that's somebody's full-time
Yeah.
job now that has to go babysit all of the automation that was supposed to free up all your time. So that is something I no longer mess with. No more automated, no more automated testers. So again, perfectly fine for like a single home aquarium. Great, go crazy. You'll probably love it. But at scale, didn't work out.
Yeah, no, there's been some stuff that I've adopted and then just it's like, not for me.
Yeah.
Rob upstate New York, thank you so much for that super chat. Comments, another great chat. Very appreciate that, Rob. Biggest fears in terms of running your farm?
Biggest fear. That the federal government makes it illegal to own coral. That's number
suck.
one. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do something very different from now on.
That would suck. Greatest satisfaction in terms of what you're doing right now?
Greatest satisfaction. I think it's the greatest satisfaction has been this new building, because there was a time where I had like an idea of what could be possible on this property. And it was like pie in the sky dream stuff. Okay? The reality that I live every day at this new building is way better than my wildest dreams leading up to it. It is so much nicer in the flesh, like tangibly, it's real every single day, and it's like, this is way better than I could have ever possibly expected, and it's getting better, which is kind of crazy.
Just a couple of interesting comment. Reef the sea forever. I am the controller. Burt Minshew. I am the controller. Those are Jake Adams quotes there. So
yes, yeah,
yes, I am in the same camp. Yes, rest in peace, Jake Adams. I am in the same camp. I started kind of like getting into the automation thing, and then I stopped.
I
I dabbled.
if it was a much more I guess like super turnkey robust thing, which is like, oh, don't worry about it. We just got it. It's like a mercury thermometer sitting on your wall. Like that thing will never fail you, right? That sort of thing. Fine. But no, when it comes to like a lot of these like million moving parts sort of things that has to hit a certain price point, uh, things
Yeah.
could go wrong. Reagents like reagent, it's expired now. It's giving you bad
Yeah.
numbers. Bad
Right.
probe happens all
Yeah.
the time.
Automatic water changes scare the crap out of me. But some people swear by them.
Was it like the two dosing
Yeah.
pumps?
I just I don't know. I just feel like that can there's too many tripwires in that equation for me. But call me old school.
Could be engineered
Yeah.
around, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you wanted to double the cost of it, you could engineer in a lot of safeguards if you wanted to.
Yeah, but the same thing with like ALK monitors / controllers. They've got a lot of safeguards in there too in terms of controlling. But I like to do that stuff myself.
Yeah, we do it manually,
Yeah.
so I get it.
All right, Than. Well, listen, man. This has been a great chat as always. Any final words that you would like to pass along to the folks out there watching tonight?
Check out my website and buy coral.
Yeah, I was going to say my other question was anything you want to plug.
Oh yeah, let's plug some things that are going on. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna be officially going to Aquashella Dallas. I will be going to Reef Stock. Come listen to my TED Talk.
I'll be there.
At Reef
I'll be
Stock.
there.
Nice. What else is going on? Actually, Andrew and his crew are coming over to come check out Tidal Gardens, so stay tuned on his channel for that. Like later this year, I might be doing something with BRS on their channel,
cool.
so we can hang out with the BRS folks. And there's a Reef to Reef live sale that we're doing this Saturday. So if you wanna spend some money on some Tidal Gardens corals, you can hang out with us on Reef to Reef this Saturday.
Cool.
Plug enough stuff.
Yeah.
Plug the whole calendar.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Than. Well, listen, man. Thanks again for being on. I really appreciate it. I know all the folks out there tuning in appreciate it as well. So thank you again, Than, for being on the live stream. Also want to thank both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine for being sponsors of the live stream and supporting the show. Also want to thank all you folks out there for tuning in and watching. Also a big thank you to Paul, who is the moderator, as well as the president of the Boston Reefer Society. Please join and support your local reefing clubs. They are so important to this hobby. Additionally, I want to give a shout out to Cornbread Custom Signs for this awesome sign behind me. It's a custom wooden handcrafted sign. It's awesome work of art. Check them out on Instagram and on the web at cornbreadcustoms.com. Finally, I want to let you know that all episodes of Rappin' With ReefBum are available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon. My next Rappin' With ReefBum live stream will be next Thursday, February 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My guest will be Chris Kapp from Aquatic Art Inc., which is an LFS in Denver, Colorado area. If you want to check out the full upcoming schedule of guests, go to reefbum.com under the YouTube section. Until then, be safe, and we will see you next time. Adios.